Yeah.
Right. Spotlight my son. And here we go. Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for everyone to log on. Let's just mute everybody. And where's Trisha? 1 second, sorry. Unmute Trisha. Okay. All right. So hello and welcome. Thank you for logging on and attending this morning's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, please let me know if there are any technical issues that I can try to resolve. You can send those to me in the chat. This program is also made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Chef Trisha Perez Keneally. She is the owner of the Inn at Hastings Park in Lexington. Trisha has been demonstrating with the library since early spring on how to make a wide variety of foods, as well as take care of your knives. And we're excited to have her back today. So please welcome Chef Trisha.
Hi everyone, how are you? I hope that everyone is enjoying these days of summer. And one of the things that's so nice about the summer is that all of a sudden we have a bounty of fruit available to make desserts. So what I was going to demonstrate today is some simple desserts, simple classic desserts that I like to make during the summer because they highlight the bounty of New England and frankly, I love all the seasons, but you know, every season sort of has its special feeling. And what I like about summer is that when there isn't a pandemic, excuse me, as I cough into my arm, when there isn't a pandemic going on, we usually tend to entertain a lot in the summer. And I love being able to finish off our dinners with a really nice fruit-based dessert. So one of my favorite things that I like to use at this time of year, although we're beginning to get to the end of the season, and you see that I'm here cutting it up, is rhubarb. Rhubarb is so plentiful here in New England, and I really feel that it's sort of the indicator that warmer weather is coming. And it just has this really, this faint sweetness that I really like. I don't like things that are overly sweet. In terms of my chocolate, I tend to be a dark chocolate person. I like fruit to sort of stand on its own when you're making a dessert. And
actually, could I interrupt? And do you mind moving the pots so people can see while you're chopping?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
This is what rhubarb looks like. My kids have often heard me refer to it as pink celery. It has that stalkish look to it. It has that beautiful pink and reddish color on the outside, and then it kind of looks more like celery on the inside. And what I'm doing is I'm making a really quick compote. And what I like about this particular compote is that it's extremely versatile. I basically am cutting 3 stalks of rhubarb, and I'm going to add probably about a half a cup of sugar is what I'm going to go with today. And what I love about this dessert is that about the compote.
Can you eat raw rhubarb?
I don't really eat raw rhubarb. My son was asking if you can eat raw rhubarb. And I don't think that it would be particularly appealing because it has a little bit of a toughness to it. But the act of cooking it, whether in your dessert or making a compote, I'm going to add probably more like 3/4 of a cup. And this is what this looks like. So I'm going to put it on the stove on about a medium, I'm going to put it on a medium high heat. And I'm going to just let that sit on the stove for about 10 minutes. And what's going to happen is the sugar and the heating of the fruit is going to give off some liquid. And that beautiful liquid is going to be used as part of a syrup for what I'm going to make first, which is actually I'm going to leave the compote first because that would take a little less time. And then I'm going to turn to a very, very classic French dessert. I'm sure many people saw Julia Child make this dessert. And what I'm going to do is I'm making a cherry clafouti. And what I like about the clafouti is that you can use a variety of fruit depending on what's in season. The very traditional French version is cherry. And I have a fondness for it because the first time I ever had cherry clafouti was actually after, it was the summer of 1992. And my dear friend Toby and I had gone traveling through Europe. We went backpacking. And our trip ended, we stayed with her aunt who lived in Paris. It was Bastille Day. Could you imagine a more quintessential time for your first trip to Paris? And her aunt had lived in Paris for a very long time. And she made us the most, we'd been backpacking and we had been eating well. We were trying to live on $40 a day, but we really would sort of save our money so that we could have a really nice meal every day. And it was sort of a treat to be staying in someone's apartment instead of staying in a hostel. And she made us cherry clafouti. And since that time, I've had a fondness for this dessert because I think that it speaks to the essence of French cooking, right? The whole essence of French cooking is to use the best available ingredient at that particular season and do as little as you can to it. And the beauty of a clafouti is that it's really just a simple combination of flour, butter, sugar in really moderate amounts. And the other thing that I like about it is that it's the type of dessert, as you can see. If you were my dinner guest, I could be standing in front of you and very easily pull this together. If I didn't have a cherry pitter, as was the case this weekend when I went to make clafouti, there are also other methods that you can use. This cherry pitter is very efficient. It kind of gets right in there. And as you can see, I'm making very quick work of pitting these cherries. The other thing that you can use, and I will show you how to do that, is actually a straw. This is actually a glass straw, right? And the beautiful thing is that it goes right through because it's sort of the width of it gets right around that pit and it comes right out. Now, the other thing that I could have done is you can see cherries do stain. So sometimes when I'm doing something like this, I will put on a pair of gloves to avoid the staining of my hands. But I love the cherry, so we'll go with the sacrifice of that. So what I was saying in terms of why I like some of these desserts is what I like to do is put dinner on the table and then I can put this right into the oven and it will bake. The other thing that I really like about it is that, sometimes people, you see a recipe and it says, oh, you need this size pan or this size dish. Clafouti is extremely forgiving. If you wanted to make it in a skillet, you could make it in a skillet. If you wanted to make it in a pie pan, I have a very beautiful red, I think it's actually an Emile Henry, so it's a French ceramic pie pan, and it has a cherry on the bottom. So I think that that's sort of the perfect way for me to make my cherry clafouti. So as you can see really quickly, I was able to get all of those cherries pitted. So the other fruits that I would use, I would do raspberries, I would do blackberries, and the beautiful thing about this time of year in New England is you're beginning to get access to all of those. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull together the clafouti batter. And as I said, very simple batter. This Hunter, can you go grab a glass measuring cup for me?
Yeah.
Great. All right, so the other thing about some of the recipes that I'm using, they call for a variety of dairy products. They call for milk, they call for sour cream. These are also pretty forgiving. A lot of people make clafouti with whole milk, but I don't tend to have whole milk in our house. We tend to be a 2% kind of family. So I'm gonna use 2% milk, and that is totally fine. I'm also going to use, my granulated sugar.
Patricia, could I also interrupt for a question?
Sure, please. And you can just ask the questions. It's
Okay.
totally fine.
All right. Where do you get someone asked, where do you get a cherry pitter?
You can get a cherry pitter at Williams Sonoma. You can get it at Sur La Table. And of course, you can order it on Amazon. And sometimes at this time of year, you can get it, you can get them, easily at the supermarket. It's really straightforward. But again, like, it's also the type of thing, if you're gonna make clafouti one time a year, use a straw. And a plastic straw works just as well as, we have the glass ones because we're trying not to use plastic straws in our house. But if you have a plastic straw, that works totally fine. All right, so I'm gonna first take my milk. And it's very important when you're baking that you use the proper measuring device. So people always ask me, is there a difference between using dry measures? So my dry measuring cups, these are the dry measuring cups, my liquid measuring cups. You really do want to make sure that you use the right thing. The other thing that I often do if I'm baking, a larger amount, like if I'm doubling or tripling a recipe, if I was doing something for a catering event, is I would often measure out. I would measure out what we were doing. And the thing about measuring is it's increased accuracy, right? When you study pastry, they have you use, they do have you use a scale. And if you were interested in using a scale and converting your recipes on King Arthur's flour, there's actually a fabulous index that converts all of the common liquid and dry ingredients into both ounces and into metric weight. And that's also a really easy way. Some people also feel that it makes less of a mess, right? Because you're just using your scale and kind of going out there. All right, so as you can see, yes?
Oh, sorry, someone asked how much milk was that you measured?
So this milk was a 1 1/4 cups, but what I'm going to do is I will also, I will share these with the library, and they will be happy to share these recipes with you as well.
Yep, we'll send out the recap email to everyone. So.
And the other thing too is that the beautiful thing, what I love about clafouti is that there's probably, if you type in clafouti, you will see so many different recipes for it online. So many different variations. And I think it's one of those things that it all depends sort of on your family's particular recipe. So what I'm doing is I'm adding the granulated sugar to my milk. I'm going to add a little bit of vanilla. I think people who have watched me before know that I'm a huge fan of Penzeys. I'm actually using a single strength vanilla, but that smells really good. I didn't really measure that because I kind of like the additional taste of the vanilla. I think that's sort of that essence, that beautiful hint of vanilla with the fruit really, really works well. All right, I'm gonna whisk that all together. Okay, and now I'm gonna add 2 cups of flour. And as you can see, I am using the fish tubs that we use in our restaurant. that is kind of what I've been using to store my flour as of late. And I'm adding a cup of flour. That's what I'm adding. I've been using those because we have been going through so much flour that it was just easier to store it in these large quantity. And as you can see, the other thing too that I'm doing is it's very important that you sort of, my flour is nice and loose in this container. So see, I've piled it high. Cameraman.
Yeah.
Sorry, my son is being my cameraman. So I piled it and then I'm going to scrape it off to ensure that we have that evenness. And then I'm just going to heat that up. And it almost looks like French toast batter, maybe. You know, it tends to be, this batter tends to be on the thinner side. So I'm going to take my Profooty pan. I'm actually, as I said, I'm using a pie pan. And I do use cooking spray. Oopsie. I just find it a little bit easier than you, of course, could butter and flour if that's what you would prefer. I'm going to put the cherries in the pan and I'm just literally pouring them in. And what I'll do after I put the batter in is I will do a little bit of food styling to make sure that they're kind of a nice pattern. So we're going to bring the camera in over here so we can show you the pattern. All right, Connor, you want to bring that in closer, please? So I'm just playing with it and I'm just going to go ahead and put that right in the oven. All right, quick rinse of the hands. All right, so the next thing that I'm going to turn to is our rhubarb spoon cake. Connor and I are going to take a walk over to the the stove rather, to see what's happening with our compote. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give that a nice little stir. But as you can see, the sugar and the fruit, it's beginning to release some of that liquid. And the rhubarb is breaking it down a little bit. The great thing about this compote, I'm going to scrape that sugar down here, is that if you have extra rhubarb, you can make a little bit more of the compote. It's actually a great topping on Greek yogurt. It's great to have on vanilla ice cream. So it's really just a really versatile thing to have around in the summer. So we're going to come back over here and we are going to turn our attention to making our rhubarb spoon cake. So the rhubarb spoon cake, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make, you can make it in a skillet, but I'm kind of going with my theme. And today I'm going to make it in this beautiful plum ceramic pan. I'm going to spray it down as well. So now my pot is ready. And if I was using a skillet, I would use not a Teflon one. I would just use a regular skillet, 8 or 9 inch. And what's really nice about that is you could put it right into the oven in a skillet, and then you would take it out and you could serve it right out of the skillet and literally just spoon the dessert out. So you'll see that there's a little bit of a similarity between these two batters. This one has melted butter in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to melt a stick of butter, but I'm actually going to do 2 butters simultaneously because I'm also going to get the butter ready for our next dessert, for the frosting for our next dessert. So I'm just going to grab some sticks of butter. Is there a question?
Yeah. What is the type of spray that you use?
Sure. let me just get one thing. Okay, so the type of spray that I use is a product called Vigaline. This is used a lot in the food industry. So this one is made, it has no GMOs in it, but there's, again, this was a product that I got at one of the baking stores. King Arthur Flour, they sell one online too. A lot of people use Pam, and I think the product has definitely improved. So it's really just a matter of what you feel comfortable with. Of course, the very traditional way of preparing your pans would be to butter your pan and flour it. And if I were going to do that, usually what I would do is I would just open up my stick of butter, like so. And I would just use the tip of of the stick of butter to be able to do that, right? So as not to create, any sort of additional mess. So what I'm going to do is I am going to melt these 2 sticks of butter, and I'm going to be taking them to 2 different stages. Hold on. So the first one I'm just going to melt, very easily. But the second one, I'm actually going to take to that nut brown stage. And what I like about the nut brown stage is it sort of enhances the flavor a little bit. There's that nuttiness of flavor that helps to add sort of a complexity to whatever it is that you're baking. So I've got one melting, and then I'm going to get the second one on as well. The nut brown butter that I'm making, I'm actually using that will actually be part of the glaze that I'm making for my second cake. The third cake, my crazy cake. There we go. And people always ask, I'm using unsalted butter. It kind of depends on what mood I'm in terms of what I'm baking, whether I use salted or unsalted butter. I think they're both great products, and really it's kind of a matter of preference. But it is important. Sometimes people, when they're baking, think that it's okay to omit salt, that they're actually doing something that's of health benefit. But actually, it's really important to use salt in your recipes because it actually brings out the sweetness in the recipe that you might be making. So I'm going to move on to making our rhubarb spoon cake batter. So what I'm doing is I'm melting the butter. I'm going to start with a cup of flour. Can you turn around behind you? There's a bag of baking powder in there that I need. So one of the things that I noticed about this recipe, so my younger son, it's next to the coffee on the bottom, I believe. My younger son has been making a lot of pancakes during this period of quarantining, and he really has developed a fantastic recipe that even though I'm not demonstrating today, I will share that with you. And what I find interesting is that the proportions in this cake are actually very similar to the pancake recipe. So what I'm talking about is there's that cup of flour, you have the melted butter, you have the eggs, you have vanilla. And so this kind of reminds me, for anyone who lived in Manhattan at any point, there was a place on the east side that used to do like these Dutch apple babies. And what it was, or I think that's what it was called, it basically was a baked pancake. So this recipe really reminds me of that. So again, I'm going to be adding milk to this recipe. This recipe calls for a combination of whole milk and sour cream. I actually am going to use whole milk. I'm going to use the 2% milk and Greek yogurt. I've also made this recipe with kefir, which is fermented milk. So I'll grab it in a second. So it really is a matter of, again, do not get hung up on what you have at home and don't be stopped by not having all of the ingredients. The milk with the sour cream will work just as well. So, hold on one second. I'm doing too many things at once today. All right, so that's my half a cup of milk, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of Greek yogurt. So the other thing too that you could use if you happen to have it in your refrigerator, you also could use sour cream as well. I can hear that my butter, can you bring it over here so they can see? All right, I'm gonna let this one in the back become the brown butter because it's sort of more along the way. The one in the front I'm gonna use for my baking, and I have that on a bit of a lower heat because I wanna make sure that the butter doesn't get too hot because I'm going to be adding it to cold ingredients. And when you do that, if there's too much of a temperature disparity, you could end up curdling milk or curdling eggs if there's that in the recipe. So this one should be done momentarily. The one that's going now nut brown, you can see I have it on a pretty high heat because I want it to sort of reach that point. And we'll show you momentarily when it gets to that nut browniness. All right, so I added in my yogurt. I did my flour, my sugar. I'm gonna add a little bit more of my vanilla. Being super generous with my vanilla today. And again, what I like to is that this recipe is also letting sort of the fruit and the compote do the talking. The compote did have sugar in it, so this is only gonna have about, this one's gonna have about 1/3 of a cup of sugar in it. The other thing too about these recipes is that you don't need a mixer, right? So when you're entertaining and you have a bunch of people in your house, the last thing that you want to be pulling out is having to pull out equipment to get it done. So this batter is a little bit thicker, right? The pancake recipe that Rory has been perfecting has a little bit more of what I would call, it looks like a ribbon. If you see my whisk, it's tracking in the cake. So now what I'm gonna do is I have my rhubarb compote, and I can hear, and I don't know if the microphone on the phone is strong enough to hear, I can hear that this butter is really, like the water is evaporating out of it. I'm gonna have Connor keep his eye on that a little bit with the camera, because what I want you to see is that when you're making nut brown butter, it moves very, very quickly. And I always think that it's very important to show people what it is they should be looking for when they're making a recipe. So we're gonna have him stay on that. And if anyone has any, if there's any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer any of those. So while the nut brown butter is doing its thing.
Ooh, it's already doing it.
Is it turning brown?
Yeah. Smells really nice.
And I think that what Connor said is actually really important. It smells really nice. There is like, it really smells nutty. It's a really great, great smell. And actually what I'm gonna use that nut brown butter for, oh, see, you can see it's turning brown around the side. Oh, look at the nuttiness on the bottom of the pan. What I'm going to do at this point, because I know that it's taking on a little bit more heat, and the other indication that I know that it's turning to that nut brown, see how the top changed? Here, bring them over here. So see how that's golden yellow? And there's no bubbles on the top? Now look at that. That's how I know that what I want to happen is happen. So I'm going to take that off of the heat, and we're going to come back over to my rhubarb spoon cake. So I have prepared my little pan, and I'm going to take my compote, and I am going to basically mix it in. A little more. And I'm just going to mix it in with the batter. And I'm just going to spread it all around. So what's nice is it kind of leaves like a trail of pink in the batter. Move that over there. And I'm going to put that in the oven. Now, the last cake that I'm going to demonstrate has a lot of different names. Some people call it depression cake. Some people call it crazy cake. And the origins of this cake came from a time that might feel a little bit like today, during the Depression, during the Second World War, when food was being rationed and there wasn't access to some of the traditional things that we use when baking cakes. But this cake is surprisingly versatile and very flavorful. A lot of people are familiar with the chocolate version of the cake, but I actually have really taken a liking to the vanilla version of this cake. And what I do is I make the vanilla cake, and then I use that nut brown butter to make a citrus glaze for it. I use the nut brown butter. I mix it with a little bit of, whether I have orange juice or lemon juice, and a little bit of powdered sugar, and I use that as a glaze for the cake. So people often wonder what sort of gives that crazy cake its structure. How is it that it's going to leaven if it doesn't have some of those, it doesn't have baking powder? So this recipe has flour, sugar. If I was making the chocolate version, it would be cocoa powder, but since I'm doing the vanilla one, it'll be vanilla. It has baking soda, salt, water, canola or vegetable oil, and vinegar. It's the reaction between the vinegar and the baking soda that actually makes the cake, it gives the cake its rise. This can be made in an 8-inch round. Today I'm actually going to make it in an 8-inch square because I wanted a little bit of variety. But again, this too is a very, very straightforward recipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out 1.5 cups of flour. And again, remembering that we're going to scoop and scrape is the name of the game. So I have my 1 cup. I'm just going to clean out my cherry one really quickly. So some other really, at this time of year, one of my favorite fruit combinations is anything with peaches, so blackberry and peaches. So, you know, when people ask the difference between, because we talked about some cobblers and crisps, crisps tend to have sort of a covering that's comprised of oats and butter and brown sugar, and the cobblers tend to have more of a biscuit on top of them. So that biscuit recipe in a lot of, you know, especially down south, that same biscuit recipe that they would use to make their strawberry shortcake is that same biscuit recipe that they would use to dollop on top if they were making any sort of cobbler. So this recipe does have a little bit more sugar in it. It has a cup of sugar, which is a little bit more than the other ones. But this cake, even though it's 1 layer, it probably can easily serve 8 to 10 people, especially if you wanted to do it with a side of like fresh berries, which would be really in keeping with what we're doing today. If you were making the chocolate version, it would be about 1/3 cup of the cocoa powder. But today we're just going to use, I'm using vanilla, so I just put a very, very generous teaspoon of it in there. Connor, grab the baking soda for me. So the other thing that's interesting about this cake is that I think, and I've actually been meaning to do some research on this, I'm gonna get a cup of water. So I think that this recipe, or sort of the science behind this recipe, might have been the origin for some of the cake mixes that we see today. So I actually have been meaning to do some research, and maybe I'll finally go through and do that today. Use my library resources to do that, and confirm whether or not my instinct is correct. You know, especially since it has that combination of the water and the water and the oil, which is some of the typical ingredients that we add when we're doing some of those store-bought cakes. So the other thing that's a little bit different than like what I've done as a variation to this recipe is I actually use apple cider vinegar. I know that the apple cider vinegar is really popular right now. It has really good health benefits. A lot of people, if you are diabetic or you're pre-diabetic, or even if you just want to be a little bit cautious about your insulin levels, and I'm doing a tablespoon. The apple cider vinegar is a really great thing to drink before you sit down to eat. You can drink it straight. I know some people that drink it straight. I actually like to mix 2 tablespoons of the apple cider vinegar with a little bit of local honey. And then we have a soda carbonator. Some people, it's like the Soda Stream or the Penguin. I just add sparkling water to it, and I add some ice. And some of those drinks, like, you know, they were called, you know, shrubs, those non-alcoholic elixirs, if you want to call them that people used to drink. They really do they're refreshing, but they also have some medicinal purpose.
There was a question in the chat about, someone said, if the vinegar and baking soda causes the cake to rise, could it be made with gluten-free flour?
I haven't tried it, but I think that you totally could. I would definitely give it a whirl. And what's also nice about this recipe is that, let me just grab my pan and I'm putting it in, is that it doesn't have eggs in it, right? So the base of it doesn't have eggs in it. It doesn't have dairy in it. I'm going to introduce dairy when I make the glaze for it. But if you have people that are allergic to eggs or dairy, this is also a really good cake to be able to make. So again, I'm going to use that spray. And I'm going to just show you what this batter looks like. It has a little bit of that tangy vinegar. Connor, can you see that? Okay. And so it pours nice and easily. I think this cake has kind of become a bit of a family favorite during these crazy times. All right, so then I'm going to put this in the oven on a 350-degree oven. I'm putting it in with our clafouti along with our rhubarb spoon cake, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the glaze for the cake.
Someone asked, did you use salt and baking soda?
I did use both of them. So here's my nut brown. Okay. And what's really beautiful about this icing recipe is that it is totally simple. I, do make buttercream. It's something that we learn how to make when we're in culinary school, but sometimes I find buttercream to be way too sweet for my liking. So what I like about this recipe is that it's a little bit thinner than your traditional frosting, but it has, it gives you that little hit of sweetness. And I like being able to add that touch of the citrus with the lemon juice. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pour my nut brown butter into here. Connor, can you show that? I want them to see the nutty particles on the bottom. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to gradually add a little bit of, or a lot of it, of powdered sugar. Now, most buttercream recipes call for, it's a scary amount of sugar. It ends up being close, to a full bag. But what I like to do with this recipe is I sort of like to play with it and taste it and achieve the desired sweetness that I want to be able to have for it. So for any other frosting recipes, even some of the buttercream, start with less and then add as you see fit. But I wouldn't start with, if it says, and some of the recipes do call for 8 cups of powdered sugar, I wouldn't start with 8 cups. I would start with 5, I would start with 4 or 5, and then start adding in more sugar until you get the desired consistency and taste that you are looking for. All right, so here is I'm going to start with that 1 cup of sugar. And that actually, so what I like about this is that you have, I think that the little flecks of brown from the nut brown butter rather, I think they add some interest to the color of the frosting. And I think today, I'm feeling very vanilla today. I think I've used about a 1/4 cup of vanilla in our baking process today. But what I want to show you too is I want to show you the consistency. I'm going to put a little bit of vanilla, and then Connor, I want you to move in tight so that they can see. So and that vanilla helped to add some structure to that. Oh, that's so pretty. So as you can see, this is spreadable. It's not totally thin, right? So, and it's not an overabundant amount of frosting. So this is the perfect amount, right? I did do a stick of butter, which is a lot of butter, but I did a cup of butter with the cup of confectioner's sugar, and I've mixed it together. And depending on my mood, I could either add the juice of a lemon, the juice of an orange, but today I added the vanilla. And then I would glaze that on the top. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the oven. Unfortunately, in the time that we have allotted, I'm not going to be able to give you, here, come on in here. I'm going to take you off the tripod. And sorry if I'm making you dizzy. Okay, so you can see the spoon cake is on the right-hand side. The clafouti is on the left. I'm actually going to take the spoon cake on the clafouti out so that you can see those. And then what I would be looking for, and hold that, Connor. What I'm going to be looking for when that cake is done is I will be looking to see like that the traditional, if I stick a toothpick in it and pull it out, then it will be clean. And you also will begin to see the cake pull back from the sides of the cake when it is ready. So I'm going to go in and get the clafouti, and I apologize because it looks like one of the light bulbs on my oven is out. All right. Oh, that looks so good. So that's our clafouti. And that is our rhubarb spoon cake. And I can tell this probably, you can tell right there. Well, it's actually pretty firm to the touch, but it looked like there was a little bit of moisture. But this cake actually really does taste lovely when there's still, if it's slightly undercooked when you take it out. If it's slightly undercooked when you take it out, that moistness just comes through. So those are 3 easy desserts that you can make during the summer. As I said, the clafouti, you can replace any type of berry in it. The spoon cake, if you can make any sort of fruit compote, which if you take, the proportions are usually a cup, or I would use like about 2 cups of fruit, taste their sweetness and adjust your sugar accordingly. I would tend to start with like a half a cup of sugar because, as I said, I tend to like things less sweet and let the fruit do the talking. And then finally, our crazy cake, if you are looking for a really easy, straightforward birthday cake to make, you can make it in the chocolate version, in the vanilla version. I will make sure that you have both of those recipes, and then you can choose to frost it with your nut brown butter glaze with the brown sugar and a hint of citrus. So those are my 3 easy baking dishes for today. As you can tell, I definitely had fun today. I made a little bit of a mess in my kitchen, but at the end of the day, I guess that's what it's all about. So I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Yeah, feel free to type questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask directly, you can do that.
And I'm going to pull up my Zoom.
Hey, Tricia.
Yes.
This is Mina.
Hi.
Hi. I'm wondering, when we first talked about you doing this class, you had said that you don't really bake that much. So are these like family recipes?
Well, okay. So I do bake. So I did study pastry. So what I don't do is do like really totally fancy over the top restaurant desserts anymore. But these are recipes that our family really enjoys. So the clafouti I like to do in the summer. The rhubarb spoon cake was a recent addition to our repertoire because we had a bunch of rhubarb early on in the spring, but I've been making it a lot and we've really enjoyed it. And that compote is awesome because I've also been using the compote. If I have a little bit, I made one with strawberries and I had a little bit more syrup in it. And I used that syrup to make lemonade. So that was really good. So I really like recipes that I can do a variety of things with. And the crazy cake, I think I've made like 6 or 7 of those in the last few weeks. I've been delivering it as birthday cakes for people because I felt that people needed a little bit more birthday joy during the pandemic. So I've been making that as a birthday cake for people.
Nice, thank you.
Oh, the other thing that we've been working on in the house too. So I'm going to send the pancake recipe along because it is just that good. And I feel that the secret to Rory's pancake recipe is, again, that nut brown butter. He makes nut brown butter to put into his pancake batter. And the other thing that we have been playing with is chocolate chip cookie recipes. And again, Rory has come up.
So good. He made them last night.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
Oh, so Rory.
He didn't tell me to go, so I told him to put him upstairs. And I like texted him, was like, hey, can I have a cookie? He was like, you can share it with Gabriella. It was so good.
Did he make, so the recipe that Rory has found that he likes the most is one that you actually make ahead of time. And he makes a homemade toffee to go in it. And he makes the recipe so that he uses an ice cream scoop to freeze the chocolate chip cookies, and he stores them in the freezer. So then we can have chocolate chip cookies made to order. And instead of using like the smaller Nestle Toll House chips, he uses larger chunks. And we actually did what did we decide? Was it the Scharfenberger?
Yeah. No, we used like
The Guittard?
Yeah.
So we did a chocolate chip.
But they were more like rounder and flat.
So we did three different we divided the dough into 3 and we tested. and we found Weetard, which they sell at Wilson's Farm here in Lexington. They have a larger chip, and we liked the size of that because that chip it melted, but it still held its integrity. So we've been baking a little bit around here and doing some experimenting with their baking.
So Aretha wants to know, how important is sifting?
Sifting.
Yes.
It depends on the recipe. If you are making something like, so these are kind of what I would call dump cakes, right? I dumped it into a bowl, we were good to go. If you are making a more elevated cake, if you are making a German chocolate cake, if you are making a Genoise sponge that has that lift, you do want to sift your flour. And I just think that it takes your baking to the next level when you're doing that type of baking. Does that make sense? So if you are making a recipe that is a more elegant recipe, afford it the respect it deserves. And the whole thing about the sifting is that you're taking your time to make sure that there aren't any particles, anything clumpy in that flour. So if it is a more formal recipe, I would definitely go with the sifting.
Okay, thank you. Do you still have the your camera on a thing, on a tripod?
We do not. What would you like to see?
Oh no, I was just gonna say that you're kind of shaky. I'm sorry, your sous chef has got.
It's butter's bad because I needed to take the camera off the tripod to get into the oven.
Got it. Okay.
I'm sorry, I got kicked off for a second, but I'm back now. Did the question about freezing compote get answered?
Oh, that question did not get answered, but I'm assuming that someone asked if you could freeze compote. So
yes, that was the question.
I think that you can. I think the thing that you need to be prepared for, if you intended to freeze the compote, I would cook it a little bit less time so that the fruit holds a little bit more of its integrity, because each time you freeze and heat up, it's going to get softer, right? Well, you'd only freeze it and then use it once. The other thing that I would do is that sometimes if you have an abundance of berries, which is really prevalent here in New England, freeze your berries. Spread the berries on a cookie sheet, spread them in one layer, freeze them, and then you could put them in a Ziploc bag, and then you have fresh local berries for the whole season. And I would do the same thing with the rhubarb. You could cut it up into the little chunks, you could put it in a freezer bag, and you could put it away and store it to have it when you're ready to use.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Oh, there we go. Do you wash berries before freezing?
Do I wash the berries before freezing? Yes, I would wash the berries, but you have to, especially with raspberries, you have to be so gentle because they're fragile. So what I would do is I would wash them as gently as possible. It's important to distinguish that when I buy berries, I do not wash berries. If I have fresh berries and I'm storing them in the refrigerator, excuse me, I won't wash them until I'm ready to use them. I also, I have made the investment in buying some containers that help sort of extend the life on my berries. Rubbermaid has a product, I think it's called Fresh Safe, and it has sort of a filter in the lid, and it helps to preserve the life of the berries. So during, I really have been trying to make sure that my family has upped our intake of fruits and vegetables, because I personally feel that that's our best way to sort of help during the pandemic, is to make sure that our immune systems are as strong as possible. So my family keeps hearing me say 15 servings of fruits and vegetables. So I really have upped the number of berries. I can get you there's someone I guess is hungry. That's what happens when people are working at home. They need to be fed in the middle of a cooking class. So the whole long-winded story about the berries is that I've been able to buy, I probably have been buying like 3 pints a piece of raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, and then a big thing of strawberries. And then I'm storing them in these containers. and I'm able to get like 5 or 6 days out of them. Whereas before, I didn't think that they lasted as long. It's 5 or 6 days, or the family's eaten them by then.
There's another question. Where are the best places to get your fruits for baking?
Fruits for baking. Okay, so the beautiful thing about this time of year is that we are so blessed to have so many farmers markets within our area. So some of the orchards that come to Lexington actually have some really good product. I also feel like Wilson's has their own native strawberries, and they do have native berries that they're bringing from their farm up in New Hampshire. What I like about Wilson's is that they do a pass on the fruit. Like they're curating their fruit, is what I would say, before they're bringing it out and putting it on the floor. So I do find that the quality of their berries is really high, especially when we're getting to the berries that are coming from the New England region, which is where we are right about now. The local raspberries will be a little bit later in the season. We're beginning to see the blueberries. We're coming to the tail end of strawberry season. So these are the best times to kind of buy them. And if you have the capacity, the room to do it, to freeze some of those berries so you have them for an extended period of time. And the other thing too, frozen berries are actually a very good product. And they're a good product that can be used for baking. If you're going to defrost them before you cook, you probably want to do it in a colander so that you get some of the juices the juice will sort of separate out so they won't be as watery. But the thing about harvesting berries that are frozen is that they're flash frozen at sort of their peak freshness. So it is okay. It's a good product. It's a good substitute to use if you're feeling that you want to have those berries in the middle of winter. It's certainly a product that I would recommend. Not my first choice, but it's better than not having. It's better than the alternative. We needed ice in our water.
Someone had a question. Berries are one of the, quote, dirty dozen, in that they should definitely be organic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that? Or can you, not do you believe that? Can you speak to that?
No, I definitely agree with that. I think it's very important for people to be aware of, grapes are certainly on that list. Grapes are a pretty controversial product as well. I eat berries at this time of the year, right? I'm not a person who tends to buy strawberries in the dead of winter. If I'm going to buy a strawberry in the dead of winter, it's going to be an organic frozen product. So I do wholeheartedly agree that you want to try to get the best product available. A lot of the farms in this area practice IPM, integrated pest management. So they may not be certified organic, but they do not use the pesticides, some of those pesticides that are associated with large scale agriculture, like big scale agriculture farming. So I am a big supporter of trying to make sure that you pay attention to that list. And we can circulate that list too, the list of the vegetables, the fruits and vegetables that you really need to be careful of about, what you should be buying organic.
Great, thank you. And we can include that in addition to the recipes in our recap email to everybody.
Actually, I was going to say, I think that Liza is doing a talk next week or the week after about cooking from the farm. So she's going to be talking about different local farm resources for fruits, vegetables, and meats. Right. We talked about that.
And the other thing too is that we are so lucky to have so many CSAs, and I'm sure that Liza is going to touch on to it. One of the beautiful things about the CSAs are there's some really healthy, flavorful vegetables that you wouldn't see in sort of a traditional market. And I'm really thinking about all of the greens in the bok choy family. So there's one in particular called tatsoi that we get a lot of from our CSA. And I had never had it before. It's actually one of my favorite green vegetables right now. And just simply sauteing it, tossing it with a beautiful fresh pasta, it's a great dinner. So don't be afraid of some of those vegetables that you might see at your local farmer's markets. Ask. Always ask the farmer, what do you use this for? how can I prepare it? And Liza will do a fantastic job, I'm sure, because Liza is also really interested. I'm talking about Liza Connolly. She's very interested, as am I, in that intersection of nutrition and flavor. So I think that that'll be a great class. Are there any other questions?
If not, thank you so much, Trisha. This was great.
Thank you, everybody. I hope we'll send those recipes around, and please do send me feedback. Tell me what worked, what didn't work, and what great food combinations you've tried in some of these great desserts. All right?
Thank you, Trisha. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Enjoy.
Good to see you.
And Trisha, do you want to just stay for a minute after everyone leaves, just to do a quick recap?
Sure, that would be my pleasure. All right.
Sure.
Bye, everyone.
We should do a video of us trying the desserts and